Welcome back to the Development Book Club. Today we will continue with the Buddha's teachings on social and communal harmony. We're going to cover Chapter 3, Dealing with Anger, which has so much really good stuff in it that we're just going to cover only this chapter in this video. So, beginning, Dealing with Anger. There's a nice poem to begin the chapter, and it goes like this. So it says, there's a guy named Sakka, S-A-K-K-A, which we'll come back to more than once in just this chapter. So he is the ruler of the devas, and he approached the Blessed One, the Buddha, paid homage to him, stood to one side, and addressed the Buddha, the Blessed One, thus, he says. To the Buddha, he says, having slain what does one sleep soundly? Having slain what does one not sorrow? What is the one thing, O Gotama, which is another word, the Buddha's name? What is the one thing whose killing you approve? And the Buddha responds, he says, having slain anger, one sleeps soundly. Having slain anger, one does not sorrow. The killing of anger, O Sakka, with its poisoned root and honeyed tip, this is the killing that the noble one pays praise. For having slain that, one does not sorrow. I really appreciated the image of the honeyed tip and the poison root of anger, because think of anger is that when we allow the anger to come out and we react to things, it feels good, like in the sense that honey tastes good. However, the root is poisoned, of course. There's much said in this chapter elucidating different types of angry people, etc. And then we speak of being spurned on by others, which holds a political and sort of interpersonal mandate from the Buddha. It goes like this. What kind of person is to be looked upon with equanimity, not to be associated with, followed, and served? Here, some person is prone to anger and easily exasperated. Even if he is criticized slightly, he loses his temper and becomes irritated, hostile, and stubborn. He displays irritation, hatred, and bitterness, just as a festering sore, if struck by a stick or a shard, will discharge even more matter. So too, just as a firebrand of the tinduka tree, if struck by a stick or shard, will sizzle and crackle even more. So too. Finally, a third image. He says, just as a pit of feces, if struck by a stick or a shard, becomes even more foul-smelling. So too, some person here is prone to anger and displays irritation, hatred, and bitterness. Such a person, here's the mandate, such a person is to be looked upon with equanimity, not to be associated with, followed, and served. For what reason? With the thought, he might insult me, revile me, and do me harm. Therefore, such a person is to be looked upon with equanimity, not to be associated with, followed, and served. Appreciate equanimity. That's always brought up, which again is one of the 4 Brahma Viharas that have come up intermittently throughout all of these books, which is to say that equanimity is neither clinging to that which we find pleasant or desirable, nor pushing away that which we find repulsive. Being even-handed with all things. A section called Removing Resentment. And we have a section on this once from the Buddha and then once from Sariputta, who we've speaking with just a little bit ago. So the Buddha mentions 5 ways that one should remove resentment. He said one should develop deep, loving kindness for the person one resents, develop compassion for the person one resents, one should develop equanimity toward the person one resents, disregard the person one resents, and pay no attention to them. And then 5th, apply the idea of the ownership of karma or karma to the person one resents. These are the 5 ways of removing resentment by which a monk should entirely remove resentment when it has arisen toward anyone. So we notice there that these are the Brahma Viharas again, except that sympathetic joy is missing from that one. So there's compassion, love and kindness, and equanimity. Sariputta addresses the monks differently. He says, when a person's bodily behavior is impure, but his verbal behavior is pure, On that occasion, one should not attend to the impurity of his bodily behavior, but should instead attend to the purity of his verbal behavior. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. Likewise, when a person's verbal behavior is impure, but his bodily behavior is pure, Sariputta says, attend to the purity of his bodily behavior. In this way, resentment toward that person should be removed. On one hand, the Buddha there speaks of the Brahmaviharas and ignoring a person as a way to remove resentment. And then you have Sariputta, let's say, focusing on the positive, or being strength-based, to use the contemporary terms. A section called Patience Under Provocation. Here the Buddha mentions 5 courses or types of speech. He says, when others address you, their speech may be either timely or untimely. It may be true or untrue. Their speech may be gentle or harsh. It may be connected with good or harm. Their speech may be spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. All those things can be different. Herein, monks, the Buddha says, you should train thus. Quote, our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall utter no evil words. We shall abide compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall abide pervading that person with a mind imbued with loving kindness, and starting with him, we shall abide pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, and without hostility and without ill will. And a reminder regarding loving kindness as it keeps coming up in this section. From the book by Cheryl, I think Salzberg was her last name, the first book we read this whole year. The meditation that we left with from that book was this: to develop loving kindness towards someone. It says, may you be free from danger, may you have mental happiness, may you have physical happiness, and may you have ease of well-being. On non-retaliation is a great section. Sariputta, again, is speaking to monks here, and he says, so then, if others abuse, revile, scold, and harass a monk, he understands thus, quote, this painful feeling born of ear contact, I'm sure that's a translation of a better sounding word in Pali. So, this painful feeling born of ear contact has arisen in me. That is dependent, not independent. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. And this is one of the 12 nidanas, I'm pretty sure of, that we spoke of in the bare bones of the Buddha's teaching, and it's part of the Eightfold Noble Path. Dependent on contact. Then he sees that contact is impermanent. That feeling is impermanent. That perception is impermanent. That volitional activities are impermanent. That the consciousness is impermanent, this consciousness. And his mind, having made an element its objective support, enters into that new objective support and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. There's a sort of an internalizing of what's going on in me, and it's all impermanent, let it pass. And he gives similar advice on physical attacks, as opposed to, this was more of a verbal, like abuse, revile, scold, and harass a monk, mentioning the Buddha's simile of the saw. And this comes up twice in this chapter, and it goes like this. This is the Buddha. Monks, even if bandits were to sever you savagely, limb by limb, with a two-handed saw, he who gives rise to a mind of hate toward them would not be carrying out my teaching. Unquote from the Buddha. A few more stories, and this will end the chapter. There's a story of a man named Vepasiti, who is the lord of the Titans, and then Sakka, who were the lord, who we mentioned earlier, the lord of the devas. There is a large battle that's going to happen between Vepasiti's Titans and Sakka's devas. And before the battle begins, each side sort of dictates what they will do with the other side's leader if they win, and they say the same thing, which is this. He says, so Vepasiti says, just as his Titans says, dear sirs, if in the impending battle between the devas and the Titans, if the Titans win, so if we win, and the devas, the other guys, are defeated, bind Sakka, the lord of the devas, bind him by his 4 limbs and neck, and bring him to me in the city of the Titans. Sakka basically says the same thing about Vipasiti. The devas win, and Vipasiti is brought to Sakka. So when Sakka was entering and leaving the assembly hall, Vipasiti, bound by his forelimbs and neck, abused and reviled him with rude, harsh words. Matali, who is the charioteer of Sakka, so worked for him like riding the horse around, he addressed him thus. So they have this dialogue that I want to share with you. So we defeated these guys. Here's their leader, and he's being like super rude and like disrespectful to you. So the charioteer asks him, he says, when face to face with Vipasiti, who's just conquered, is it, Sakka, from fear or weakness that you endure him so patiently, listening to his harsh words? So are you afraid of him, or is it like a weakness in you that you don't like just yell back at him? We just beat you guys, like shut up, basically. Sakka responds, he says, it is neither through fear nor weakness that I am patient with Vipasiti. And he asks, how can a wise person like me engage in combat with a fool? The charioteer Matali responds, he says, fools would vent their anger even more if no one would keep them in check. So this is kind of Socratic, even though Socrates came after all these guys, where he's sort of playing the devil's advocate here. Well, like, wouldn't he be even worse if you didn't keep him in check? So hence, with drastic punishment, a wise man should restrain the fool to keep him in check. Sakka replies, I myself think this alone is the way to check the fool. And he says, this is the way to check the fool. When one knows one's foe is angry, one mindfully maintains one's peace. Matali, the charioteer, responds, I see this fault, O Sakka, in practicing patient endurance. So he says, you're saying to be patient, but this is the problem with being patient. When the fool thinks of you thus, the fool sees your patience and he says, you're only enduring me out of fear. He endures me out of fear. The dolt will chase you even more as a bull does one who flees. So he says, like, the angry person sees this and he's just going to run after you more just because he thinks you're afraid. Sakka replies, let it be whether or not he thinks he endures me out of fear. Of things that culminate in one's own good, none is found better than patience. Huge virtue here, patience, that culminates in your own good. Sakka continues, when a person endowed with strength patiently endures a weakling, they call that supreme patience. The weakling must be patient always. He continues, they call that strength no strength at all, the strength that is the strength of folly. But no one can reproach a person who is strong because guarded by the Dhamma. One who repays an angry man with anger thereby makes things worse for himself. Not repaying an angry man with anger, one wins a battle hard to win. He practices for the welfare of both his own and the others, when, knowing that his foe is angry, he mindfully maintains his peace again. When he achieves the cure of both his own and the others, the people who consider him a fool are unskilled in the Dhamma. So, monks, if Sakka, so this dialogue ended, Sariputta Sariputta's talking to the monks again out of that conversation. So, monks, if Sakka, Lord of the Devas, could speak in praise of patience and gentleness, then how much more would it be fitting here for you, who have gone forth in such a well-expounded Dhamma and discipline, to be patient and gentle? Great story there. I want to keep going because this stuff is so good. A couple more. So there's the Buddha's words to a guy named Akosara Bharadvaja. And so this is a Brahmin, so we'll call him Akosara. Basically what happened was one of Akosara's family members left the family to become, it says, homeless with the Buddha. So after being abused and reviled verbally by Akosara with rude, harsh words, because one of Akosara's family had left his family to become homeless under the ascetic Gotama. And so here, I'll read what the Buddha's response was. The sutta doesn't even say like what the guy said to him. But when Akosara had finished speaking, the Blessed One said to him, quote, "What do you think, Brahmin? Do your friends and colleagues colleagues, kinsmen and relatives, as well as guests